hard games are tricky. They are a great challenge, but they also are an exercise in patience. While some embrace the challenge and eventually overcome it, others do not take kindly to being presented with something more difficult than they expected. Me, I just love playing games. I don't really care how easy or hard it can get as long as I get my fun, and while I am not immune to rage and frustration, difficult games have helped me develop my own patience a lot better and also taught me to maintain a level head while figuring out how to get out of a tough spot. Ghostrunner is a great example of this. It came out right at a time when Cyberpunk 2077 made everyone start craving the futuristic cyberpunk aesthetic, and in turn, it ended up offering a challenging yet extremely fun adventure, one filled with adrenaline, platforming, rage, and satisfaction. In this game, we play as the titular Ghostrunner, a techno-organic cyborg named Jack, just as he wakes up at the bottom of Dharma Tower, one of the last remaining cities in the world, right as he got defeated in the middle of a revolution and thrown out of the window. Our journey sees Jack climb all the way back to the top in order to defeat the Keymaster and liberate humanity from a plan that will see every remaining human reduced to a mindless collective consciousness. And that's about it. The story in this game may very well be flavor text, as the core of the game is you climbing through the tower and overcoming increasingly difficult obstacles. I think the best way to describe the gameplay for Ghostrunner would be like this. The game is essentially a mix of Mirror's Edge with Hotline Miami. You are a cyber ninja armed with a high-frequency sword facing off against enemies that get easily chopped down. The catch, however, is that you are just as vulnerable as they are. Even the slightest bit of damage can kill you in a single hit. This turns every combat encounter into a bit of a puzzle. You have to figure out the right sequence to dispose of your enemies before they dispose of you, and while it can take a few tries, nailing down the last enemy can be extremely satisfying. In between combat segments, you also get some parkour/platforming challenges. While it is not as complex as, say, Mirror's Edge, it also has its fair share of fun to be had. You can use wall running and other ninja skills to get yourself from point A to point B, and despite looking a bit simplistic at first glance, this kind of free movement opens up the levels for you to move in ways that makes me believe the developers designed intentionally to allow the speedrunning. This means that if you look around enough or exploit your bullet time skill to keep yourself climbing as you wall run, you can sequence break entire gameplay segments and make it to the next area while saving up time and frustration. It was a pleasant surprise, and it's the kind of things that give games like this depth and substance in spite of being seemingly smaller and linear. Now, there is more to the combat than simply worrying about which order you want to kill your enemies. Like I said earlier, everyone can kill you in one hit, but their challenge comes from how well armed they are and how exactly they can kill you. While you get your regular gunmen to dodge bullets from, you will also get hit with others that have shields that you have to find a way around in order to cut them down. Eventually you get to close-quarter enemies that you need to parry or dodge before you can deal a finishing blow to, and later on, robots and turrets join the fray, needing you to find different tools or dodge to the right places before you can give them a well-paced slash. And there is even variations where these enemies are going to be protected by energy shields, and you have to find a power source before trying to take them down. In between segments of platforming and combat, you are going to visit the Cybervoid, a virtual reality where you have to solve small puzzles and unlock activities for the Ghostrunner. It's not too remarkable and some of the puzzles can be confusing at first, but I guess they were made for a small breather, and it's kind of a hit or miss, to be honest. They also mark an escalation to the conflict, because just like the enemies get better equipped to face off against you, you get better equipped in return with unique skills that can fit different situations. You get a teleport slash attack that lets you cut multiple enemies in a row. You have an energy blast that can send enemies flying and return bullets back to them. You get a ranged slash attack that sends a cutting wave that can take down multiple enemies. And you can even mind control one enemy so it starts killing its own allies and make life easier for you. These abilities got their own cooldown and you have to either wait or get more kills in order to refill it. So it's the kind of emergency button you want to use to get out of a difficult situation. Now, remember I said these levels are fairly linear but with their fair share of depth? Well, in order to encourage exploration and replayability, the game has hidden collectibles, in the form of either audio logs or alternate skins for your sword. It's not much, but getting to them is actually pretty fun. To the point in a first playthrough I nearly got all of them, with a few exceptions of course. Combat and exploration are not the only things you can do in this game. On 3 different occasions you are going to have boss fights, and they are a bit mixed. Mostly because they can range from challenge your twitch reflexes and platforming skills to simply becoming a test of timing, waiting for the right sequence where you can inflict damage and move to the next part of the game. I guess this partially explains why there is only 3 of them, as it feels they realized they couldn't do much else with them, but it also feels like those 3 bosses could have been a lot better. It doesn't help that the first boss is a crazy fast-paced laser obstacle course that comes at the end of an intense yet simpler early segment. It's the one point in the game where you can feel there's a spike in difficulty, and judging by comments online, it looks like it negatively affected a lot of players, which I don't really blame them for. I came pretty close to rage quitting them myself, but the one thing I realized with that segment, and this carried over to the rest of the game, is that the best way to overcome these difficult parts is by keeping a cool head. Yeah, you are going to die a lot, but if you slow down to pay attention to the environment around you, then you can figure out the right patterns and movements for you to make a move, and it actually works out. My low points with this game came always when frustration will get the better of me, and I will find myself subconsciously trying to brute force my way through. That is a great mistake that we as gamers make too often, and it's precisely what makes us ruin otherwise great games for ourselves. Now, I talk enough about the gameplay, let's talk about the environments. Dharma, being a gigantic tower/city, is a fantastic setting for this kind of gameplay. All the platforming and combat segments get spiced up greatly by making them take place in quite a nice variety of environments. You start at the bottom of the tower, dealing with vents, machinery, and junk that gets thrown in from the upper levels. And as you work your way up, you enter the more residential areas. And then, eventually you work your way up to the more corporate areas and laboratories leading up to the Keymaster. I especially love this because it turns the game into an even bigger spectacle, moving between giant vents and machinery, then wall running through neon signs and watching how people lived in this dystopian cyberpunk world, and then coming face first into the horrors of human experimentations. There were points in this game where I just stopped for a moment and take in the visuals. One of the greater perks of having your game take place in seemingly small-scale levels is that it lets you crank up the visual spectacle while maintaining the optimization. This game is pure eye candy, and you can tell a lot of love was put into it. It's a shame not enough was put into the story, not that I feel this game needed a story, mind you. The core of the plot in this game is freeing humanity from the Keymaster, all while being guided along the way by the Architect, an AI that is comedically unsubtle about his motives for helping you out, and what he hopes to achieve after taking down the Keymaster. You also get Zoe, a young resistance fighter who also was trying to climb up the tower and liberate humanity. Both are trying to steer you along, and while the moral conflicts of your cyber ninja choosing one mission control over the other is interesting, it never really goes anywhere you can't guess a couple of hours into the game. In the end, it's all just flavor, people dumping exposition and monologuing as you move through the levels. You could honestly play the game with the entire dialogue muted, and it wouldn't really make a difference. And if you needed more confirmation on how little relevance the story has to this game, even the enemies had their names and types relegated to the game's manual. The point I'm making here is that this is more of a gameplay-oriented video game, and with an industry full to the brim with cinematic, heavily scripted, story-driven games, I will forever welcome games that leave all the action and storytelling in my hands, with my own actions. This is where replayability plays a big part, no pun intended. First-time playthroughs may leave you spending up to an hour if you find yourself stuck at certain places and rack up deaths in the hundreds, but if you come back to them after a while or go for a second playthrough, you will find you took a lot less time to complete the levels and you died even less as a result. First-time playthroughs are great and provide you with their own memories to treasure, but I will always treasure replays just as much, because they are a sign of growth in your own skill. Speaking of skills, the game also includes its fair share of extras. If you don't want to feel too frustrated, the game includes an easy mode you can use to get accustomed to the controls and the enemies, making it a lot more tolerable and a lot less frustrating. In turn, there is also a hardcore mode that adds new enemies to the previous levels and makes completing them at all a whole accomplishment by itself. But if you want to test your skill in new ways, there is a survival mode. 20 randomly generated waves that you have to overcome, with new perks and benefits being rewarded at every turn. And you have to choose wisely, because a combination of poor choices and bad luck can have you face extremely unfair circumstances. But thankfully, not two playthroughs are the same, so coming back gives you a chance to get a better set of perks and enemies. But if speed is more your thing, there is a speedrun mode. Small challenges to get to the finish line as fast as possible. Not really my forte, but I am glad it's there for those who are interested. In the end, Ghostrunner is a challenging and super fun game. It's intense, it's rewarding, and it makes figuring out the right sequence for fighting enemies extremely good and satisfying. This is why I am happy to give Ghostrunner a fantastic 9 out of 10. It has some shortcomings, but considering I completed nearly everything there is to offer, I'll say it succeeded at its job. The game is only 1 year old at the time of this recording, but I still hope it gets a sequel. I loved playing through it, and I can only hope to see what more the developers can do by expanding these mechanics. Because a fast-paced challenge always makes for a nice formula to spice up your gaming time. It also helps hone your skills, so playing other games will suddenly feel a lot more easy and a lot more satisfying.